I became so in touch with what actually happened. What we were taught in school is not what actually happened on the sugar plantations. We were told that, and we learned this in bullet points in history, that on the 16th of November, 1860, the first ship carrying 342 passengers arrived on the shores of Natal. They served out a 5-year indentured contract, and they were given a piece of crown land. Some of it was true.
Indenture was true.
The name of the ship was true, and the date. Right? Yeah. But it was tantamount, indenture was tantamount to slavery. So around that time, 1860, when they first arrived, slavery had been abolished across the world, and there were labor shortages on the plantations and throughout the British colonies and the British Empire. And so the British decided to devise another scheme that would allow for cheap labor on these plantations across the globe. And so in a contract with India, they developed the scheme of indenture. So they would migrate people from India to their plantations. And in this particular case in South Africa, it was the sugar plantations of Natal, where they would be in a contract to work on these plantations for a 5-year period, and they were promised at the end of this 5-year period a piece of crown land, which never materialized, right? So that was the impetus and the motivation for these people actually accepting these contracts. So that was what indenture was.
Because a lot of people had sanitized the experience of indenture. Like, I didn't really know anything about the violence. I mean, I chose to be ignorant about it. Yeah, it was almost like a revelation. Like, oh, there was rape and violence. Oh, and my goodness, there was people getting whipped, and they would get their sentences, I mean, not sentences, but their term of indenture. Like, so it was all like clean, but it was also like, in a way, a sentence. Like I didn't realize there was kidnapping, coercion, lying to them, telling them there was like this gold.
So the impression is that people willingly came because they were of the lowest classes, but they were coerced and they were promised like a better life. I mean, even now, people immigrate for a better life, right?
So they came here and they had to adapt and, learn lots of different cultures. And
did Ma speak Telugu or Tamil?
She spoke Telugu, Tamil, Hindi, Zulu, and English in that order of copies.
And one of my core memories with her is her trying to teach me. It was either Telugu or Tamil, and me trying to teach her English. And that Red Lorry, whatever book, right? So teaching her to read, actually, she couldn't read English. She could speak English, she couldn't read it, I think, at that point. So India at that time, and still very much in contemporary India, there's this class system, or we know it as the caste system, and where there was a social hierarchy. But what happened was, the moment these immigrants boarded these ships, that seemed to destabilize, mainly because the British did not acknowledge these caste hierarchies. There was literally no space on these ships to maintain a caste hierarchy. So people from these different castes had to live together, had to sleep in the same quarters, had to eat the same food. And the different religions around which these castes were based had to remain together, right? And while it would seem that many historians believed that these immigrants thought that once they arrived on the shores of Natal, that the caste system would automatically, go back to how it was in India. But what happened was, the moment they arrived, the British bureaucracy that faced them, I think it stunned most of them from what they believed they were coming into. So they were indiscriminately placed in different plantations, irrespective of your caste. They were also, again, joined by the common thread of their indenture. So their experiences together provided more common experiences than what the differences based on their caste. In many instances, we won't say it was destroyed completely. I would say it's been reformulated. It's not widely accepted to marry across those language barriers, mainly because those relics of the caste system and the superiority and social hierarchy, those remnants are still there.
My family, I stand under correction, could be fifth, sixth generation that came from India. I know on my maternal side, my great grandparents were born here. The same on my grandparents' side, so perhaps my grandparents. But it's not it's not really something that has been spoken about in our family, where we sort of can date back to when, who came, and how they came. And so for as far as I can remember, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents was very fortunate to have met and spent a lot of time with, were all born in South Africa. I've been cooking for more than half my life. I grew up in a family, or I'm still part of a family, that we've always been surrounded by good food, always great cooks. And I think it's been one of my fondest memories as a child. Every gathering was a gathering around a table.
I think there used to be some stigma attached to being a descendant of indentured workers, mainly because under apartheid, and colonization and white supremacy that was so deep through our school system, through what our parents were indoctrinated with, that Indian people aspired, especially the descendants of indenture, to whiteness. I remember interviewing someone for my PhD thesis, and she said that she had given her children English names so that they stood a better chance in white South African society as opposed to giving them vernacular names. So the fact that 90% of South African Indians do not speak the vernacular language is testament to this, the fact of what white South Africa had done to Indian languages.
I've grown up to, food has been something around my activism that has been quite a central part of it. And I haven't also identified as Indian in my political activism. I identified primarily as a black person when we were fighting against an apartheid system that segregated us, and which was built on divide and rule. So I think, in this, I matriculated in '76, and it was the generation of Black consciousness and Steve Biko, and the idea that we're not non-European and non-white, and we're black, and we're fighting against this system of the structural system of racism. And there's a lot of things culturally that I practice, that I love all the spices and using them, food that I cook, and I love dal curry and rice, and so it's interesting. I'm coming here. I think I'm not sure whether I've never really embraced the word because of the ethnicity, the ethnic divisions that this country perpetuates, and India right now perpetuates.
I almost feel like it's like the flip side of my search for identity and this idea of finding my way back to my grandmother, but also finding my way back to that part of who I am. I mean, it was a similar thing, for me, becoming politically conscientized, where you rejected these classifications. Let's just face, they were classifications, and it was easy for someone like me to do so, because it wasn't clear what I was rejecting.
So the rejection of Indian, I think it was two-sided. The one was to identify as black against the white oppressor, and the other was to try and fit into white society, right? And I think for the longest time, I rejected the racial classification Indian. So we had white, black, colored, and then there was a nationality, Indian. Yeah, an Indian, we always seemed to belong elsewhere. We were always other, we were always different.
Growing up, I was not aware of any of the politics around being Indian, but I experienced so much of that rejectionist with feeling within of being an only Indian in an all-white school and coming with my mom's bread and mug on my bread and dal or leftover sugar beans and being like embarrassed of the smell and like it was hard to accept being Indian because I didn't fully understand what it really meant.
And the other thing was the coconut oil, the use of coconut oil in our hair and things like that. And so the smell of that, I just thought that was in my time growing up. But when I did my research, even the indentured Indians it would be in the newspapers that they smell, how they smell. Food is very much a marker of culture, right? Like your attire, your jewelry, your language. And so it serves as this kind of like transnational link to your homeland. And so when the indentured workers came in, they brought with them a little piece of their home that they could then adapt to their changed environment. So they were in survival mode, so they had to adapt to survive. So they added to what they already knew. So adding potatoes to curries and adding lentils to rice and biryani, which is not common elsewhere, but is unique adaptation in South Africa.
What you making?
You're gonna cook.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna cook your curry, the vegan masala that you like. Do you wanna cook? You wanna help me?
I do. So you dry roasting the
The
punch
seeds, yeah? That's enough. Okay. You can put the oil in now. Maybe put it on the onion. So then because if you put it straight into
It's
the
gonna
oil, then it's gonna splatter. And just mix it so that the spices and the oil is incorporated. Salt the onions a little bit.
Okay.
Just so that it helps it cook.
Now you just let it.
So you let it, yeah. And it's gonna take like 10 to 15 minutes for this too.
I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I've learned a lot from my mother, my grandmothers, and I love eating. So
I have this love relationship with food. I love food, and I love experimenting with new recipes.
Deanne, it needs to be even.
it is. It was.
No, it wasn't.
You touched it.
No, if it's not even, then it's not getting even heat.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Durban and my grandmother practically raised me. So where I find myself now as a middle-aged Indian man who loves cooking, none of that came was transferred. We watched our mothers in the kitchen. We watched them make rotis. We watched them, make vada. We watched them do all of these things from early hours of the morning till we went to bed, trying to keep that memory of my grandmother alive through reverse engineer the types of food that she cooked.
Didn't grow up cooking or with a love of cooking, rather. My mom and one of my other grandmothers as well, her mother-in-law, both were anti the kitchen space because it was like a place of oppression for women. And I kind of also didn't want to do the stereotypical thing of being a good Indian woman. And I wanted to stand outside with the men, talking and hanging out, having a good time. Anyway, I got into cooking later on, basically, through the change into veganism. And then also being in another country, all the food and the smells, and that connected me back home. So I almost felt like less homesick. I'm interested in is how in South Africa, I have this phrase like desegregate the plate. Because we have all these different cultures and we don't ever mix them all up together on our plates.
But we should try and be more curious about each other's
foods.
So I decided to learn more about spices and get more involved with cooking, and as a way of preserving my heritage. Like I was saying earlier, I started this before I learned how to cook curries in more complexity using all the spices. I just made this 3 + 3 = curry recipe, which onion, garlic, ginger, turmeric, cumin, chili, and then you mix those together, you fry them up, and then you can add whatever you want, tomato and another vegetable, or you can add meat, or you can add whatever, fish, and then you've got a curry, and it sort of reminds me of my heritage.
Do you want to come and add the turmeric? So half a teaspoon, like half of that teaspoon of turmeric.
Like that
Yeah,
much?
perfect. And then, and about a level spoon of the, yeah.
bit more.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And a bit of salt,
How much? Like a pinch?
a healthy pinch. Do you want to mix?
Yeah.
Okay. There we are. Just scoop it up. Perfect. That's
that
perfect.
much.
Perfect, yeah. And then when you check it, when the oil starts slowly separating from the tomato and braised mixture, then you know that it's cooked out enough.
Okay.
And then you can add the cashew milk.
And then the veg goes last.
You add the cashew milk and you give it a stir, and as soon as it starts to thicken, then you add the veg, because this is already roasted.
We were talking about eating with our hands. And Ayurveda is big on that also, because each finger represents a different element of the atmosphere. Air, ether, fire, water. And so you are getting in touch with yourself and what you are made of and the elements you are made of, you know, when you eat with your hands. So we want to eat with a knife and fork, and it's so angry, you know, making noise. And
And also, it's eating with all your senses, right? You're touching, you're smelling, you
that's very, very, that's important. And you connect.
So this is the secret is the sun.
That's the yellow.
Yeah, this is the yellow. Every brown girl's problem.
And cinnamon is a great
Yeah.
herb as well to use. It's antifungal, antiviral,
Yeah.
antibacterial. You know, just put some cinnamon into hot water, let it boil for a while. So you can use them in a variety of ways, variety of combinations. Yeah. So I truly believe in them.
My mom's grandmother was also a, what was she?
A midwife and a healer. So she also grew vegetables and plants, and she had a really deep knowledge of. I think that the thing is that, I mean, Ayurveda became this codified knowledge system that had actually been passed on generation after generation, and people just knew it without knowing that this is what it's called.
Yes, definitely. Now I'm adding the cashew cream.
Right. Scrape it.
And give it a stir.
Okay, so I think that's good. What you can do is maybe just swipe the spoon and just have a taste for salt.
Of course. I think it's perfect.
Okay.
How long is that going to cook for before I add the veg?
We can leave it for 2-3 minutes, and then you can add the veg. So the veg cooks within the sauce.
Okay.
When my son was about a year old, and I felt I needed to just change my life. Then that took me into Ayurveda primary health counseling, where I learned about the properties of the different spices, and that just everything fell into place for me. Then I said, "Oh, I've arrived home." You know, somehow I couldn't explain what it was, but it was there. I knew cumin was for digestion. mustard seeds digestion. Just learning about the spices and going through dishes that I had cooked but didn't know why I was doing it. And I learned about the importance of ghee and the different combinations of spices. You know, all I knew about garam masala was that, okay, you use it for meat. And Tanya Jiro you use for everything else. And so that also then gave me it empowered me to use it as a medicine for myself and my family. They weren't always very cooperative when it came to that, you know. So I would, you know, concoct all these.
Yeah, my mom also did the same.
Ginger. I say, okay, something's wrong, ginger. Yeah. Ginger is the answer to everything.
Oh, that's nice. Nice, gentle simmer. Can you feel it?
Yes.
Can you feel it thickening?
Yes.
Okay, amazing.
Should I add the veg?
Yeah, I'll help you.
Okay.
Just scrape it off. I'll do it for you.
Thank you.
And you can just stir the pot.
How did you prepare the veg?
Olive oil, salt, Kashmiri chili and coriander, and garam masala.
For how long?
I roasted it for about 40 minutes. So now you leave it to simmer for a while, just so that the vegetables heat through, and then you end with about a tablespoon of garam masala.
Okay.
So for the longest time, there was a mythical masala that we never knew how it was made, but we just knew when a woman gave birth that an auntie or a grandparent would mix that into, or make a chicken curry more often than not with that masala, because it was said to heal the woman from the inside after birth and also to help with lactation.
The main ingredient is ajmo, which is celery seed.
Yeah.
And it cleans out your womb, and it's also encourages breast milk. But samrani, what is it?
Samrani is the smoke. Yeah.
And you stand over that, and it helps to heal.
But that, with rasam is my memory of childhood whenever we got colds.
Yeah.
Yes, and that also during COVID. Lots of people was making it and selling it because we didn't have access to our mothers and our grandmothers, right? And so that's also made with like a blend of spices, cumin, a whole lot of things, and tamarind as well, right? And so the community also came together in that way. It's like, we know this is an indigenous way of healing from the inside. So like this indigenous knowledge that we had was rejected at that particular time, and that was the things that made us different. But now it's appropriated by the West and then celebrated.
For example, yoga has been like that. Yoga's been, I mean, that was so marginalized, 20, 30 years ago.
Yes.
Few people did it. And now it's mainstream.
Yes. And then I realized that even though we don't have so many like Indian things, that's an Indian cultural thing that I would associate. It's not just also Indian, but many people around the world from marginalized groups are just like...
indigenous groups across the world.
A big pot to feed everyone. It really challenges our conception of family. I mean, I'm a quantitative social scientist, and one of the things that we grapple with is how to define a household. And key to the definition is if you eat from a common pot.
It's a lovely thing that of having the big pot and adding to it. And people weren't rich. They were, they were working class and poor families, and they had large families. But there was a real culture of sharing.